Hi, I'm Rick, and this is actually my first video that I'm going to try to put on the internet. I was inspired by my father-in-law, by what he did. He ended up reading scriptures and getting those taped, and he stuck them on the internet. Uh, it was really interesting to see the things that he put on there, and it was really helpful because actually shortly he did about 7 videos, and then shortly after he did those, he actually died. So it was really kind of nice for myself, for my wife to see what his thoughts, what was important to him just before he passed away. Uh, so it kind of in memorial to him, or in light of him, I thought, well, if he can do this in his 80s, I surely could be able to do this also. So actually, one of the first things I want to discuss is the scriptures in Matthew 5, particularly verses 15 or 17 through 19. And I feel that what we have heard from the church on these verses is not correct. And so I'd like to spend a little time reading these verses and give you my take on how these verses should actually be interpreted. So let's first go to Matthew 5, read these verses, and then we'll get into how I think we really should be interpreting these. So in Matthew 5:17, it says, "Do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have come not to abolish them, but to fulfill them. I tell you the truth, until heaven and earth disappear, not the smallest letter, not the least stroke of a pen, will by any means disappear from the law until everything is accomplished. Anyone who breaks one of the least of these commandments and teaches others to do the same will be called least in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever practices and teaches these commands will be called great in the kingdom of heaven." Okay, so the main contention that people have with these verses is particularly in verse 17, where it says, "I have not come to abolish them, to fulfill them." What people have said, the word fulfill, they interpret that as meaning to end. They have said that uh, Jesus didn't Jesus came and he fulfilled them, and so now they're ended. We don't have to do the law anymore. Um, but when you look at the word in the Greek word for fulfill is polarero, uh, and there's several different definitions of it. One is to end, uh, but the vast majority of times it means completion or to fill up, to fully preach. Uh, I think one good way to look at that is if you have a cup or a glass, and this glass represents the total knowledge of what we can know about the Bible. And when you have the law and the prophets, basically the Old Testament, it fills up part of this cup. We have part of everything that we know about what God wanted to tell us. And so to demonstrate that, we're just going to say, hey, we're going to fill the cup up, and you're going to see, it filled it up partially. And we're not going to be too particular on saying, well, the law represented this much or this much. But anyway, it just filled it up partially. We have partial knowledge of everything that God wanted to tell us. Well, I think the word fulfill is to fully preach has kind of like an idea of to fill up and overflowing. So give you an idea, it's kind of like this. It's like when you fill it up, it fills it up all the way, and as you can see it actually overflows. And that's what Christ did. He came, and when he gave us the word, he came it so it was overflowing. He fully preached the law. So So I think that what Christ really meant when he said he fulfilled the law is that he fully preached the law. Now, another thing to look at is we need to look at the context. When you look at hermeneutics, one of the biggest things that they say, I ended up picking up the 16 rules of hermeneutics from a website, the Reformed Theology, and number 8, it says, consider the immediate context. I've heard some people's professors say, context, context, context. Context is everything. Well, when these people look at these verses, and you gotta, let's say, how can it mean to end the law when you got the next couple verses that says, I tell you the truth, until heaven and earth disappear, not the smallest letter, not the least stroke of a pen will by any means disappear from the law until everything is accomplished. I mean, has has the earth disappeared? No, I'm still here. I can still walk on this rock that we call the earth. It's still here. Uh, is heaven still here? I mean, which heaven are we talking about? I mean, there's Paul talked about three heavens. The air, the stars, and then the place where God resided. I'm assuming he's talking about either the air or the stars. We can still see the stars and we still breathe, so it's still here. So if they're still here, there's no reason to say that the law still has been passed away. Okay, so then he also says he puts eternal consequences on what he's saying, that on following the law. He goes and he says, if anyone who breaks one of the least of these commandments and teaches others to do the same will be called the least in the kingdom of heaven. Okay, so he's saying, he's not saying you're not going to make it to heaven if you don't follow the law and if you tell others not to follow the law, but he is saying you're going to be the least. But then he also gives a promise to those who do teach the law and practice the law, and it says anyone who breaks one of the least of these commandments and teaches others to do the same will be called least in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever practices and teaches these commandments will be called great in the kingdom of heaven. I just can't understand why they can take one verse and make a doctrine out saying that Christ told us to throw the law away, when you got the next two verses basically saying just the opposite. How can they do that? They're not following, and these are some of these people that I've listened to have their master's degree, and how can they take something out of context when they have taken the classes or the hermeneutic classes? They've gone through all 16 things that I have in my hand here, especially on the context, to follow context. How can they twist the scriptures like that? So I submit to you that Christ, in his beginning, in John 5, this is part of the Beatitudes. This is one of the very first things that he taught when he started preaching. And he was he was trying to prove that, tell them right away that I didn't come to abolish the law or the prophets. In fact, if you go to Deuteronomy 13 and 18, he pretty much had to say that, otherwise there was a chance that he would have been stoned, and otherwise he really would have been a false prophet. I think right now I'm going to end at this point. I would like to want to keep these videos really short, to the point. I'm going to do probably another couple videos on this topic. Uh, so I hope you'll listen to some of the other videos and and get something out of it. So thanks a lot. We'll talk to you later.